Christmas is supposed to be about love, family, forgiveness. But what happens when the people who raised you can't forgive the choice you made? When choosing love means losing family? When a proposal brings joy but costs you everything? This is the story of Tae-yang and Imani. A love that started in Seoul's winter. A proposal made without permission. And a Christmas that changed everything. Some families heal. Some don't. This is a story about the ones that don't. December 2 years ago. The city sparkles during Christmas season. Lights everywhere. Myeongdong glows like a fairy tale. The Han River reflects 1,000 colors. Seoul doesn't celebrate Christmas like the West does. But the aesthetic, the romance, Koreans perfected it. Imani Washington arrived in Seoul that December on a Fulbright scholarship. 27 years old. African American. Born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia. PhD candidate in Korean studies, focusing on contemporary Korean literature. Her parents were professors. Her grandmother was a civil rights activist. Imani grew up surrounded by books, Black history, and the constant reminder that education was freedom. She'd been studying Korean for 6 years. Could read Hong Kong in the original language. Could discuss Hwang Sok-young's political metaphors. But she'd never been to Korea. Seoul University gave her an office, a research budget, and a teaching assistant. Enter Tae-yang, 29 years old, PhD in comparative literature, teaching assistant by day, aspiring novelist by night, and the eldest son of the Kwon family. Not just any family. The Kwons were old Jeonju money. His great-grandfather was a scholar during the Japanese occupation. His grandfather rebuilt the family fortune after the Korean War. His father, Kwon Jae-sung, owned one of Korea's largest publishing houses. Tae-yang was supposed to take over the company. Instead, he was writing novels nobody would publish and teaching foreign scholars about Korean poetry. His parents were not pleased. Their first meeting was in the university library. Imani was struggling with a particularly difficult passage in a Park Won-soo novel. The Korean was complex, layered with historical context she wasn't grasping. Tae-yang was shelving books nearby and overheard her frustrated sigh. "Excuse me," he said in English. "Do you need help?" Imani looked up, and there he was. Glasses, oversized sweater, coffee stain on his sleeve, kind eyes. "I'm stuck on this paragraph," she admitted. "The translation I have doesn't match what I'm reading." He leaned over, read the passage and smiled. "That's because this sentence has 3 meanings depending on context." The translator chose the safest one. But Park Won-soo was being subversive here. They talked for 3 hours. About literature. About the way language carries culture. About how translation is always interpretation. "You actually understand her work," Tae-yang said, impressed. "Most foreign scholars just analyze from the outside. You're reading from inside." "I try," Imani said. "Though I'll never fully understand. I'm not Korean." "Neither was she in a way," Tae-yang said. She was a woman in a society that tried to silence women. An outsider perspective can sometimes see truth more clearly. That was the beginning. Seoul in December is cold. The kind of cold that makes you want to find warmth anywhere you can. Tae-yang and Imani found it in each other. They met for coffee, then dinner, then long walks along the Cheonggyecheon stream, watching the Christmas lights reflect in the water. Imani learned that Tae-yang wrote every morning from 5 to 8 a.m. That he'd written 4 novels, all rejected. That he kept writing anyway because he had to. "My father says writing is a hobby, not a career," Tae-yang told her one night over jjigae. "He says I'm wasting the Kwon legacy." "What do you say?" Imani asked. "I say the Kwon legacy should be about creating meaning, not just making money." "But who listens to the disappointing eldest son?" Tae-yang learned that Imani had a younger brother with autism. That she'd almost become a special education teacher instead of pursuing academia. That she carried guilt about leaving her family to follow her dreams. "My parents supported me," she said. "I left. But I see their faces on FaceTime and I know they miss me. My brother especially. He doesn't understand why. You didn't leave them, Tae-yang said gently. You're expanding your world so you can bring more back to them. They fell in love the way scholars do. Through conversations that lasted until dawn. Through shared books and different perspectives. Through the realization that someone finally understood the way your mind worked. One night in late December, walking through Insadong during a light snowfall, Tae-yang stopped. I need to tell you something, he said. Imani's heart raced. I'm falling in love with you, Tae-yang said. Actually, I've already fallen. Past tense. Complete action. He laughed nervously. Sorry. Grammar jokes. I do that when I'm scared. Imani kissed him. Right there on the snowy street. I love you too, she said. Present continuous tense. Ongoing action. They both laughed. Two nerds in love. But love, especially in Korea, doesn't exist in a vacuum. I should tell you about my family, Tae-yang said as they walked hand in hand. Okay. They're traditional, conservative. My father especially. He paused. They'll have opinions about us. Because I'm American. Because you're not Korean, Tae-yang said honestly. My father has very specific ideas about who I should marry. He's probably already picked someone. Imani stopped walking. Tae-yang, are you saying we can't be together? No, he said firmly. I'm saying it won't be easy. But I'm willing to fight for this. For us. If you are. I am, Imani said. Neither of them knew how hard that fight would be. 3 months into their relationship, Tae-yang's mother demanded to meet. This American woman. Not ask. Demanded. Lee Miran, Tae-yang's mother, was everything Imani expected and feared. Elegant. Cold. Impeccably dressed in a cream hanbok that probably cost more than Imani's entire research grant. The meeting was at the Kwon family home in Songbukdong, one of Seoul's wealthiest neighborhoods. The house was traditional Korean architecture mixed with modern luxury. Museum-quality art on every wall. Imani wore her best professional outfit. Had her research prepared in case they asked about her work. Practiced her formal Korean greetings. Tae-yang's father, Kwon Jae-sung, barely looked at her during dinner. His silence was louder than any words. His mother, however, had plenty to say. So, Miss Washington, Mrs. Kwon said in perfect English. Tae-yang tells us you're studying Korean literature. Yes, ma'am. I'm focusing on contemporary women writers and their role in. How interesting, Mrs. Kwon interrupted, though her tone suggested it wasn't interesting at all. And after your scholarship ends, you'll return to America, yes? The implication was clear. This relationship had an expiration date. I'm considering opportunities in both countries, Imani said carefully. My research could continue here or in the States. I see. Mrs. Kwon set down her chopsticks. Miss Washington, I'll be direct. In Korea, family is everything. Lineage matters. Tradition matters. My son is the eldest. He has responsibilities to this family, to our name, to our legacy. I understand that, Mrs. Kwon. I respect. Do you? Mrs. Kwon's eyes were sharp as glass. Because from where I sit, you're a temporary fixture in my son's life. Faith. He'll outgrow this fascination with Western ideas and remember who he is. Imani felt Tae-yang tense beside her. Mother, he said quietly. That's enough. Is it? His mother turned to him. You bring home a woman we've never heard of. Someone who doesn't understand our culture, our expectations. She understands more than you think, Tae-yang said, voice harder now. Imani has spent years studying Korean culture. She speaks our language. She reads our literature in the original text. You've spent 30 minutes with her and decided she's not good enough because she's not Korean. His father finally spoke. Tae-yang. One word. But the weight of it silenced the table. Mr. Kwon looked at Imani for the first time. Really looked at her. Miss Washington, you seem like a smart woman. So I'll speak plainly. My son has obligations, a family business to inherit, a legacy to continue, children who will carry the Kwon name. Can you give him that? The question hung in the air. I can give him love, Imani said quietly. Respect, partnership, a life where he can be himself, not just the Kwon heir. Isn't that worth something? Mr. Kwon's expression didn't change. No, it's not. Dinner ended shortly after. In the car, Tae-yang's hands shook on the steering wheel. I'm sorry, he said. I'm so sorry. They were cruel. They were honest, Imani said, though her voice cracked. They don't want me in your life. I don't care what they want. Tae-yang. I don't, he said fiercely. I love you. That's what matters. But as they drove through Seoul's glittering streets, Imani wondered if love was really enough. 1 year later, December again. Christmas in Seoul is magical when you're in love, even when that love is complicated. Tae-yang's parents had made their position clear. No approval, no blessing, no acceptance. They stopped inviting him to family dinners when he refused to break up with Imani. His mother called once a month with information about suitable women from good Korean families. His father cut his allowance. Said if Tae-yang wanted to be independent, he could support himself. So Tae-yang did. He taught more classes, tutored students, worked at a bookstore on weekends. His novel was still unpublished, but he kept writing. Imani's scholarship had been extended for another year. She was making real progress on her dissertation. Seoul University wanted to hire her as a professor when she finished. They were building a life together, without his family's approval. On Christmas Eve, Tae-yang took Imani to end Seoul Tower. The observation deck was packed with couples, but he'd reserved a private spot. Seoul spread below them like a constellation. Millions of lights, a city alive with possibility. Do you remember the first time we came here? Jiang asked. Imani smiled. You told me that every light was a story waiting to be told. And you said some stories are worth telling even when no one wants to hear them. He took her hands. You taught me that. You taught me to be brave. Tae-yang, what? He dropped to one knee. Time stop. Imani Washington, he said, and his voice shook. I don't have my parents' blessing. I don't have my father's approval. I don't have anything except this. He pulled out a ring. Simple silver band with a small diamond. Nothing extravagant, but it was his. He'd bought it with money he'd earned himself. I have my love for you, Tae-yang continued. My absolute certainty that you're the only person I want to spend my life with. My promise that I will choose you every day no matter what it costs me. Will you marry me? Imani's eyes filled with tears. Your parents don't get a vote, Tae-yang said firmly. This is my life. Or life. I'm asking you, Imani. Not them. Will you marry me? Yes, she whispered. Then louder. Yes. Yes, I'll marry you. He slid the ring on her finger. Kissed her while Seoul glittered below them and strangers applauded. For one perfect moment, nothing else mattered. But perfect moments don't last. Tae-yang called his parents the next morning. Christmas Day. I proposed to Imani, he told his mother. She said yes. We're getting married. The silence on the other end lasted 10 seconds. Then his mother hung up. His father called an hour later. You've made your choice, Mr. Kwon said. His voice was ice. Now live with the consequences. Father, I love her. You've embarrassed this family. Disrespected our traditions. Thrown away your responsibilities for a woman who will never understand what it means to be a Kwon. She doesn't have to be a Kwon, Tae-yang said. I'll take her name if that's what it takes. Then you are not my son. Blick. The next day, Tae-yang's younger sister, Kwon Min-ji, called. She was 24, studying medicine, and had always idolized her older brother. Appa, she said, crying. Father is furious. Mother won't stop crying. They're saying you've betrayed the family. I just want to marry the woman I love, Min-ji. I know, she said. And I'm happy for you. Imani is wonderful. But Appa. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Father says if you go through with this, you're cut off. Completely. No inheritance. No family events. No contact. He's serious. I understand. But I don't. Minji cried. Why does it have to be like this? Why can't they just accept her? Tae-yang had asked himself the same question 1,000 times. Because they see me as property, he said finally. An investment. The eldest son who exists to continue the family name and business. They don't see me as a person who deserves to choose his own happiness. That's not fair. No, Tae-yang agreed. It's not. The wedding was small. Imani's parents flew in from Atlanta. Her brother came too. Some friends from the university. Colleagues. No one from Tae-yang's family. His mother sent a message through Minji. Until he comes to his senses, he is not welcome in this house. The wedding was beautiful anyway. City Hall ceremony. Dinner at their favorite restaurant in Itaewon. Imani wore a simple white dress. Tae-yang wore a suit he'd owned since college. Imani's mother, Patricia, pulled Tae-yang aside before dinner. I want you to know something, she said. In our family, love is enough. You chose Imani. You fought for her. That makes you family. You always have a home with us. Tae-yang broke down. This woman he'd known for 3 days was offering him what his own parents wouldn't. Acceptance. Belonging. Thank you, he whispered. But gratitude couldn't fill the hole his family left. 3 years passed. Tae-yang's novel was finally published. Small press. Not his father's company. It won a Newcomer's Award. Got good reviews. Sold modestly. He was happy. Proud. His parents didn't acknowledge it. Imani finished her PhD. Seoul University offered her a tenure-track position. She became Professor Washington, the first black woman in their literature department. She was thriving. Tae-yang was proud of her. But sometimes late at night she'd catch him staring at his phone. You can call them, she'd say gently. They won't answer. You don't know that. But he did. He tried. Dozens of times. His mother blocked his number. His father returned his letters unopened. Only Minji maintained contact. Secret phone calls when their parents weren't home. Quick coffee meetings she had to lie about. They still won't talk about you, Minji told him one day. It's like you never existed. Father removed your photos from the house. Mother tells people she has 2 children now, not 3. Erased. That was the word that haunted Tae-yang. His parents had erased him. Do you regret it? Imani asked him one night. Choosing me? Never, Tae-yang said immediately. Imani, you are the best decision I ever made. I just wish. He trailed off. You wish you didn't have to choose. Yes. Imani held him. And wished she could fix it. But some things can't be fixed. December came again. 3 years since the proposal. Imani was pregnant. 3 months along. They hadn't told anyone yet except her family. Should we tell yours? Imani asked. Tae-yang stared at his phone. His mother's blocked number. His father's returned letters. 3 years of silence. Maybe a grandchild will change things, Imani said hopefully. Tae-yang called. His mother answered. After 3 years she answered. Mother, he said, voice shaking. It's me. Tae-yang. Silence. Mother, I'm calling because Imani is pregnant. You're going to be a grandmother. I thought you'd want to know. That child will not be a Kwan, his mother said. Her voice was dead. Me. Just like you are not my son. Don't call this number again. Blick. This year. Christmas Eve. Tae-yang and Imani's apartment in Itaewon was decorated. Small tree. Lights. Stockings. Imani's family was visiting. Her parents. Her brother Marcus, who'd flown in from Atlanta with his caregiver. Their daughter, 3-year-old Zara, was excited about Christmas morning. She had her grandfather's laugh and her grandmother's curiosity and her parents' love for stories. She'd never met her Korean grandparents. Appa? Zara asked, sitting on Tae-yang's lap while Imani and her mother cooked in the kitchen. Why don't I have Korean grandparents like my friend Miho? Tae-yang's heart broke. You do have them, sweetheart. They live far away. Can we visit them? How do you explain hatred to a 3-year-old? How do you tell your daughter that her grandparents refuse to acknowledge she exists because of the color of her mother's skin? Maybe someday, Tae-yang said. Later that night, after Zara was asleep and Imani's family had gone to their hotel, Imani found Tae-yang on their small balcony. It was snowing. Seoul was beautiful under fresh snow. You're thinking about them, she said. It's Christmas, Tae-yang said. I always think about them at Christmas. Do you regret it? Imani asked. Not for the first time. Tae-yang turned to her. Really looked at her. His wife. The woman who'd stood by him through everything. Who'd given him a daughter. Who'd never once said, I told you so, when his family cut him off. I regret that I had to choose, he said. I regret that my parents couldn't love who I love. But regret marrying you. Regret Zara. He shook his head. Never. Not for a second. Even though they never forgave you. Even though, he said firmly. Imani, they didn't forgive me because I chose you over their expectations. But you know what? I'd make that choice 1,000 times over. 'Cause you're real. Our life is real. Our daughter is real. Their approval. That was always conditional. It was never real love. Imani kissed him. I love you. I love you too. Inside, Zara's voice called out. Iyama. Santa is coming. They laughed and went inside. To their daughter. Their family. The one they chose and the one that chose them back. 5 years. That's how long Tae-yang's parents held on to their anger. Min-ji finally got married. To a Korean doctor from a good family. Everything their parents wanted. The wedding was enormous. Traditional. Perfect. Tae-yang wasn't invited. But Min-ji sent him photos. And in those photos he saw something that broke his heart. His parents looked old. His mother's hair was gray. His father walked with a cane. They'd aged dramatically in 5 years. And they looked alone. Surrounded by hundreds of guests. They looked alone. 2 months after Min-ji's wedding, Tae-yang's father had a stroke. Mild, but it scared everyone. Min-ji called Tae-yang. He keeps asking for you, she said, crying. In the hospital. When he was confused. He kept saying your name. Tae-yang went to the hospital. Alone. Imani stayed with Zara. His mother was in the waiting room. She saw him and froze. For a long moment they just stared at each other. How is he? Jiang asked. Stable, his mother said. Her voice was hoarse. The doctors say he'll recover. I'm glad. More silence. 5 years of silence compressed into one painful moment. You have a daughter, his mother said finally. Yes, Zara. She's 5 now. 5 years. His mother's voice cracked. I've missed 5 years. Tae-yang wanted to say, whose fault is that? But he didn't. Because anger wouldn't change anything. You can still meet her, he said quietly. If you want. His mother looked at him. Really looked at him for the first time in 5 years. Would she want to meet me? After everything. She's 5, Tae-yang said. She just wants grandparents who love her. Can you do that? I don't know, his mother said honestly. I've been angry for so long I don't know how to stop. Then maybe start with trying, Tae-yang said. That's all anyone can do. He left his phone number with Min-ji. Told his mother she could call when she was ready. 3 weeks later she called. Can I meet her? His mother asked. My granddaughter. They met at a park in Hanamdong. Neutral territory. Zara, now 5 and bold, walked right up to this stranger who was her grandmother. Halmiani, she asked. Are you my Halmiani? Tae-yang's mother knelt down. Looked at this beautiful child with Korean eyes and African-American features. This granddaughter she'd refused to acknowledge. And broke down crying. Yes, she whispered. I'm your Halmiani. Zara hugged her. Simple as that. No grudges, no conditions. Just a child hugging her grandmother. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. Tae-yang's father still wouldn't speak to him. His mother came to visit Zara but wouldn't stay for dinner with Imani. There were boundaries, rules, careful steps, but it was something. Crack in the wall. The beginning of maybe. And sometimes maybe is enough. Christmas that year Zara made cards for everyone, including her grandparents she'd just met, Halmiani and Harabiaji. She wrote in careful Korean letters Tae-yang had taught her. Merry Christmas. I love you even though I just met you. Ura. Tae-yang's mother called after receiving it. She has your handwriting, she said. When you were young, you wrote just like that. It was the first personal thing she'd said to him in 6 years. She's a lot like me, Tae-yang said. Stubborn. Loves books. Asks too many questions. His mother laughed. Actually laughed. A sound Tae-yang thought he'd never hear again. I'm sorry, she said suddenly. I'm so sorry. For all of it. I know, Tae-yang said. I'm sorry too. For the pain I caused you. You didn't cause pain, his mother said. You chose love. I caused pain by not understanding that. They talked for an hour. About Zara. About Tae-yang's writing. About nothing and everything. When they hung up, Tae-yang went to find Imani. My mother apologized, he said, still in shock. Imani held him while he cried. Years of grief and relief pouring out. See, she whispered. Love does win. It just takes longer than we want.